some Microsoft wording to do because some of the stuff is just coming in kind of funky and I don't know, something's happening with the images and I didn't have time to spend on it today. So
Yeah, and I hope you don't think
Hey,
I jumped on. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
just FYI, I just think I did the live stream, so I have no idea if that's going right now. The recording's paused, but
do you want me to get on my other laptop and check?
you can check. I think it's there. I just wanted to give everybody a heads up.
That we may not want to be talking about certain things like drugs and colonoscopies. Julie, does that YouTube feed? I'm assuming it does not allow for sharing, right? It's just
Actually,
to watch what we're
No,
doing.
no, it's just so that people
probably do it on my
can
phone.
access the meeting.
Okay, so I'm going to indicate to people when we start that if you are simply here to watch, you may, and we get over a certain number, it would be a kindness to scoot on over to the YouTube stream.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll go
And
through
I
my
think
phone
it's,
here. I'll show you. So let me see.
yeah, I think it's working.
So Susan Mary, I guess my question
streaming.
before we get too far ahead is,
Yeah.
Is it streaming?
yep, right now.
Cool. All right.
Okay.
So we're
All right. I'm gonna let people in.
perfect. Thanks, Julie.
Okay. So how do you want to go about doing this, Susan Mary?
Which part?
Well, since I've never been through this with the board, like how do you want to go approach the budget? And then I guess on the warrant articles, we'll just go one by one and see if we have
Yeah.
any questions on them.
Yeah, I think I would recap what the finance committee, I think we are aware of what they did. And then I would open it up for discussion.
Okay.
I just want to make a little public service announcement.
Yeah.
Just if people, as they're coming in, please put your name. There has been some issues with meetings and unexpected visitors, so I'm going to be watching that. So just put your name in as soon as you sign on, not like iPhone or Jude, so that I know who you are.
Great. And Julie, have we done any of the other suggestions that we got from the schools to help you? Okay, great.
I'd like to shout out to Julie for putting all this together and adding the live stream with the Harvard Media Cooperative. They did a fantastic job today. It's our first time, so thank you, Julie.
And Will and Brittany, they were awesome.
Yep,
Came
yep.
right in today to see me, so
Yep.
huge thanks.
So great collaborative event and nice pulling it off. So thank you.
Ditto. Julie, so we've left people with the ability to unmute themselves?
Yeah. Yes, they can. Yeah.
Okay.
right, so we have 3 members here.
What am I not seeing? Okay, we have a little less than a minute left. Who is on that isn't on, Julie? Camera. Oh, car's on. Okay.
We're just waiting on Rich and Charles.
Yeah. Well, I will start at 7 and go through the preamble.
Oh, here comes Rich.
Great. Great. Okay, it is 7 o'clock and we do have a
All right.
quorum. I'm going to start the recording. Great. Welcome everyone to tonight's select board meeting. Today is March 4th, 2025. I am Susan Mary Redinger, chair of the select board. This meeting is being conducted via Zoom, and for the first time for a select board meeting, we are also streaming it on YouTube. I will say something about that in a minute, but before that, I will read our preamble, which is pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023 and Act making appropriations for the fiscal year 2023 to provide for supplementing certain existing appropriations and for certain other activities and projects, and signed into law on March 29th, 2023. This meeting will be conducted via remote participation. Interested individuals can listen in and participate by phone and/or online by following the link and the phone number below. We have implemented the YouTube link because we maxed out on people last week. If you are here and we get up to over 100 and you don't plan to speak, I would ask you to kindly go over to the YouTube link as opposed to being on the Zoom link. It doesn't look like we're anywhere near that right now, so hopefully we'll be under that 100 limit, but keep that in mind as we move forward. Also, please keep in mind that this meeting is being recorded. It is in attendance by members of the press. All right. We will be starting also with a public communication similar to last meeting. I will ask that people keep their comments to 3 minutes. We have less than 20 minutes allocated for this segment. I will extend as possible, but we have a very full agenda discussion regarding the budget this evening. So please keep your remarks as concise as you can. And also please remember to state your name and address for the record. So that said, I will open it up to public communication. If you would like to speak, you can either wave your hand, which is a little less accessible, or you can raise your hand via the app. Okay, so I see, whoa, people are moving around. I see Abby, I see Rachel, Craig, and Alice. We'll start with those 4 and go from there. So Abby.
And Les Rourke.
Okay, thank you. Abby?
Is it my turn? Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Hi, Abby Bessie, 9 Westcott Road. And I'm here tonight as the chair of the school committee to urge you all to adopt the finance committee's recommendation of the full override amount. Their recommendation is not an arbitrary figure. It's what is necessary to sustain the current level of services in both our town and our schools. And anything less than the full override will result in painful cuts directly impacting education and our students, as well as the quality of services our town provides for all of us. The school committee has presented a budget that reflects the needs of the district and most importantly, our students. We have already made adjustments, we've made cuts, we've used our offsets, including the Devon's tuition account as much as possible, and have increased fees to be as fiscally responsible as we can be. Excuse me. As in every other community in the Commonwealth, contractual pay increases, transportation, special education, and inflation are the primary cost drivers of everyone's school's budgets. Harvard is not alone or exceptional here, nor are we alone in needing an override to fund our town and our school's budget. So our budget request reflects those pressure points. Our contractual salary increases for professional staff is topping $550,000. Our special education tuition increases is $250,000. Transportation cost increases is $330,000, and utility cost increases across all school buildings. And to simply maintain what we currently have and honor our contractual obligations, the schools need approximately $750,000 or $748 to be exact, and anything less will result in cuts to staffing and programming and jeopardizing the high quality education we have promised, both by tradition and by word, to our students. Beyond these essential costs, we are requesting 4 critical investments totaling $207,000. An essential elementary reading curriculum update that's required by DESE at $77,000. A special education teacher at Bromfield budgeted at $75,000, which we previously requested in last year's second tier, or the second tier of last year's override that didn't pass, and the need still exists. A certified occupational therapist assistant and tech support for our schools. The school committee and leadership team have been scrutinizing and refining this budget since September. We have fully justified our requests. The finance committee has also thoroughly assessed our requests through multiple meetings and extensive questioning. Their recommendation is a responsible one that supports the needs of our students. Is that 3 minutes?
That's 3 minutes.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you
Thanks,
so much,
Abby.
Abby.
Thank
Okay, I
you.
think I called on Craig, Rachel, and Liz, and I see Susie. So we'll go with those. Craig? Do you know how to unmute yourself, Craig?
Oops.
There you
Yeah,
go.
Craig Maxey, 3 Still River Depot Road. And I want to really address most of my comments to Don Ludwig and following on last week's meeting. First of all, I just want to say that I completely agree with the select board's statement on February 25th. And to Mr. Ludwig, there's no question to me your comments did not represent the entire community of Harvard at all times, end quote. I think your position as chair of the board magnified your misrepresentation of our town, and for you to remain on the board would continue to do so. And from my point of view, no one's saying you can't say this stuff. It's just, they're saying it violated a rule that you agreed to at the expense of the town you represent. I would have hoped that you would have offered a robust defense for degrading the groups in your posts rather than have retreated in a heat of the moment type of defense. And, you know, I got to say that I think it's really sad that sharing disrespect for others has become more prevalent. Finally, I want to thank Colleen Pierce for having the courage to stand up in defense of our town. I also want to thank the board for fielding any potential bias and protecting the integrity of the board. And to be clear, I am open anytime to go to the general to discuss any of my positions on this. And that's all I really wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Craig. Rachel?
Hi, Rachel Cope, Littleton County Road. I'm asking the select board to recommend the full budget override as proposed by FinCom and not to try to break it into tier 1 and tier 2. I thought the 225 FinCom meeting discussion had many salient comments, including that at this point, any more cuts and we're hurting ourselves. The 227 FinCom meeting recommended no tiers because the difference at this point is negligible. And I believe it will add confusion with no material benefit. That's the conclusion, overwhelming conclusion of the finance committee. I would ask the select board to respect that conclusion. I believe that Abby Bessie's comments very well summarized the issues in the in the school budget. And at this point, that It's largely necessary to meet contractual obligations, contractual and legal obligations, and is level service save for a position, save for the things she recommended, particularly a position that will be budget saving by retaining more district students in district versus paying costlier out of district fees. So I think that it's risky to cut anything out at this point. So I ask you to support the recommendation of FinCom. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Rachel. All right, Alice, I think you're next.
All right, thank you. Alice von Lessica, 84 Warren Ave. And, you have a huge decision to make, and all of us in town are going to have a decision to make about the override. And so I went and looked at what the impact of passing the full override would be, because a lot of people think, okay, if we pass the whole 1.37 million override, then that's all we need. Using the town's financial model, we will still need additional overrides for FY27, about 725,000, another override of about 570,000 in FY28, and then a third override of 600,000 in FY29, because we have a structural deficit. And so much of our budget are people with their associated salaries, as Abby says, contractual increases, benefits tied to them, pension costs tied to them. And a single override, we will have more and more overrides following it, unless there are some budget cuts somewhere along the way. However, on the flip side, if there is a full override, that is the choice, no tiers, and it fails, then there's a expected reduction in staff, and the taxes would go up very little. However, it still causes huge problems because of the large reduction in staff. And what I would advocate is perhaps a middle ground of some smaller override that would require a few budget cuts, and that would get into making sure that we are addressing the structural deficit. If you continue to ask for the town for more money, but you're not addressing any of the core issues, I fear that the town will no longer want to provide the funds. And if you step back a bit and you look at the very last year, right before the pandemic, which was FY20, we had about the same number of people in town, we had the same number of kids in the schools. If you look from that point to right now, the town has added 4 FTEs. An assistant town clerk, assistant director at the COA, administrative assistant to the land use boards, and an assistant accountant. This is about $190,000, $200,000 worth of positions. In that same time frame, the schools have added 19 new positions. And this is already discounting people that were moved from one role to another and positions that were added and then reduced because during COVID, they needed a lot of staff and they did a great job, hired people, and then let them go when they were no longer needed. The cost of all of those positions, the schools, is about $1.3 million. The vast majority of them, about 16, are in special education. 2 of them, and then some additional hours, are in administrative roles, and 1 is facilities. Over this time, the academic headcount has basically, and the cost allocated there, has remained about the same. Some teachers and positions have been
Pardon me, Alice.
removed.
Excuse me, Alice.
Others-
I apologize. We're at the 3 minutes. My apologies.
Oh, okay. Sorry. But so that is my recommendation, given that a lot of new stuff has already been put into the budgets, that the full override, that's part of the reason why the full override
Thank you, Alice. Thank you.
is to step back. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alice.
Okay, Liz.
Oh, I'm going to say what I need to say, even though my voice shakes, as they say.
Sorry, Liz, name and address.
Thank you. Name, Liz Ruark, Orchard Hill.
Thank you.
My remarks are to Don Ludwig. I am beyond furious to see you here tonight. You have been asked to resign by the select board for your atrocious public behavior that clearly violates the board's code of conduct, but you are choosing to ignore them. I can only assume, based on what you're doing now and what you have done in the past, that you believe you don't have to obey those rules. Your actions indicate that you believe that you can be as publicly disrespectful to women, people of color, and queer folks as you like, and you should suffer no consequences. I am here to tell you that you are wrong. Actions have consequences. Your town knows who and what you are now, and we will not forget. I am also here to beg the select board to ignore anything that Dodd Ludwig says from this moment forward. He has no place on your board, as you have told him. He can sit there at your meetings if he wants to act like a self-centered child and force you to let him in, but you are under no obligation to listen to a single word that he says. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. All right, Susie, then Colleen, then Elizabeth.
Thank you, Susie Allen, Littleton Road, here on behalf of the school committee and budget subcommittee. I am here following Abby Bessie's statement to specifically advise the select board that the school committee has received advice from our lawyer that the past practices of the town are not in line with Mass General Law and do not respect the authority and legally mandated responsibility of the elected school committee. The law requires that the school committee's budget be placed before town meeting, and the select board has no authority to change the budget approved by the school committee for presentation at town meeting. This knowledge should absolutely impact your discussion on the override tonight, because we are telling you and have clearly stated that we need an additional allocation above what was funded for this year to provide level services to our students for all the reasons previously noted by Ms. Bessie and discussed at length with the Finance Committee. We are empowered by the knowledge from our lawyer to bring our full budget to the voters at town meeting. And if less than that is approved by this board tonight, the school committee has the legal mandate and authority to bring our full budget request to town meeting for a vote by the town citizens. Having said that, I would of course like to tell you that the school committee remains committed to collaboration with the town and to be responsive to the taxpayers of Harvard. We understand it is our fiscal responsibility to balance the needs of the school district while being fiscally responsible and responsive to the taxpayers of Harvard. However, we want to make clear to you that we have this legal responsibility and mandate per Mass General Law to present the budget that the school committee deems necessary to provide an adequate education for Harvard Public School students. And the select board has no role in determining the amount of the school budget to be presented for a vote at town meeting. Finally, since I have a few seconds, I would ask you to disregard the funny numbers and statistics presented tonight that were just shared. They're inaccurate and misleading. We have refuted these inaccuracies in the past, and for whatever reason, they keep coming back. We would be happy to talk with you about and present the data and facts regarding our budget and our budget history. I can't correct it all now, but it's imperative to know that Harvard Public Schools did not add 19 full-time positions since 2020. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Susie. Let's see, Colleen or Elizabeth and then Colleen, right?
Elizabeth Neese, Fulton Road. I also am here this evening to encourage the select board to follow the recommendations of the Finance Committee and the months of work that they have done together with other people in town, including the school committee. I hope that you will consider the override as one single package instead of a tier. I remember last year when the tiers came out, and quite frankly, I think that it adds confusion when people are at town meeting and at the poll. I encourage you to follow the recommendations of the Finance Committee, who have been working on this issue for months and months, and to ultimately let the voters decide where our values are in our town. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Colleen?
Colleen Pierce, Bolton Road. I'm really glad to see you here, Mr. Ludwig, on the meeting tonight. And since you're here, I really wanted to direct my comments to you because you didn't show up at the last select board meeting, and I have not heard that you've been willing to step off the select board yet. Mr. Ludwig, it takes great courage to admit egregious behavior, and I applaud you for that. I'm sorry you suffered verbal abuse and your car was vandalized. That should never happen, not to anyone. which is why as a society we have consequences for egregious acts and not just personal retribution. You claim to be merely caught up in a political commentary game. However, the hate-filled rhetoric you espoused is not just a game. These are real people. Your statements do not disagree with their policies or ideas, but rather you demean women because they are good-looking or because you deem them ugly. You criticize people because they are Black or because they are gay. And yet we live in a country founded on the idea of pluralism. You stated protesters, quote, should be dragged away and locked up, but then you applaud when the January 6th protesters were exonerated, whose action turned into a violent riot where police officers were trampled, maimed, and killed. I find the double standard really difficult to understand. We are all free to express ourselves, but our statements define our character, whether it's in a select board meeting like here tonight or in the public sphere of X. You have lost credibility and trust that you can treat your Harvard neighbors with fairness and respect, knowing that when you take off your select board hat, your judgment is dependent on the other's race, gender, or who they love. I am sure it's been a challenging ordeal for you. And I really hoped that you would have taken this opportunity to reflect on how your disparaging words hurt real people, and importantly, undermined our ability to move forward in a pluralistic democracy, which depends entirely on diversity of ideas. Without civil discourse, and when those differing viewpoints are cloaked in belittling tribal language intended to divide, it denigrates not only our town, but our greater democracy. And sadly, sir, you as well. I truly hope that you will step off the select board. And again, I'm grateful to all of our town leaders that volunteer their time and their talents to make Harvard the special place it is. But I'd like to understand, what is the point of a unanimous vote of censure
That's time.
when it has zero impact? And what can we do to remedy this gap in governance? Thank you.
Thank you. We are at 20 minutes. I will allow Beth, Jen, we've heard from you last time. So in the interest of getting one more public comment in, if Beth is short, we'll get two. If not, we'll get one. Beth Williams.
Beth Williams, Granite View Lane. I ask that you recommend what the Finance Committee has put forward. If this does not go forward as recommended, the Council on Aging would take approximately a $25,000 hit, which would not enable us to continue level services. I hope that we have the reputation of being a town that is known for our schools. I hope that by going forward with this, that we also get the reputation of being a town that supports our seniors and our education, because the library would also be taking a hit if this does not go forward, of about approximately $25,000 as well. Please keep our good reputation, both as a town for schools, a town for seniors, and a town for knowledge. Thank you.
Thanks, Beth. All right, Jen, you got 2 minutes. You'll wrap it up.
All right, thanks. Jen Manel Stowe Road. Let's get into it. We have a censured select board member who was asked to resign here tonight. I was hoping for better from our Harvard neighbor, but digging in heels is certainly a predictable outcome. We can conclude that he had concerns about being held accountable rather than doing the hard work of taking accountability, which leaves the community to take up the slack and do more work. It's Taco Tuesday, I'd rather be at dinner. I understand public commentary time is not a back and forth, but I would like answers whenever possible, hopefully soon. What are our next steps as a community? What are the next steps as a select board? And who will be voting on our budget tonight? A budget that is to represent all residents, disabled ones, queer and transgender ones, Black residents, immigrants, women, and even ones who wear fun glasses. Will it be 4 members
or it'll include one that does not recognize the personhood and disparage the majority of those in our town. Thanks.
Thank you, Jen.
Thanks, John.
All right, that will conclude the public comment section. If people notice, there is another public commentary at the end of the meeting. What I wanted to do, and we've done this at the school, so my fellow select board members don't know that this was going to be the case, but having a comment period at the beginning allows people to plan for 7, and having a comment period at the end is really for us to capture comments. People who, an item that may have been introduced that we would be voting on in the future, to make sure we capture that feedback while it's fresh. So to my fellow select board members, I appreciate your willingness to incorporate these. If it doesn't work, you are free to take it out when I'm not here. All right.
It's a good idea.
Susan,
Susan Marie.
thank
It's a good
you.
idea to have comment at the end. It's fine.
Thanks, Charles. All right, so next is the budget. I believe everyone has had the tier overrides documentation from Jared. I don't know if everyone was at, I think we've heard, and maybe everybody does know that the Finance Committee voted to not tier it, to recommend the full override. The logic behind their thinking was the differential that they felt would be in an override was so small in comparison to the entire budget that it wasn't worth it. I know Dan has asked Jared to prepare some other numbers for this evening's discussion, but we have tonight to come up with what we will recommend to the town or put before the town for a town vote. That said, I'll open it up for discussion. It's a meaty topic, so let's dig in. Would someone like to start the ball rolling? Do we have questions? First, we'll do questions. We do have people here that could answer questions. Do people have questions about any of the items that are on the budget? Pretty clear on what's being asked of us. Okay. All right. Well, then who would like to start off? Maybe a place to start from or a point of conversation. We can go from there.
Well, just a couple of things. I mean, I understand the sentiments that were expressed in public commentary about making sure we completely support our educational goals and also the town side goals too. That said, this is not an override that's going to be considered an impact on our tax bills that should not be considered in a vacuum. We not only have our known exposures to tax increases, with whatever tax override we approve or suggest this evening. We have potentially a new fire station to consider. We have a multi-million-dollar cleanup at the Old Town dump to consider. And then we have all the things that we haven't even considered. We haven't even had the tax impact from our connection to Devon's for water actually added to our tax bills yet. So, you look at your tax bill today, what you received, in January, and it seems like an okay number, but then in a year, you're going to have the water bill, the water connection impact, and everything is additive, at least with capital debt exclusions, you have, the possibility after the length of the bond for that impact to be reduced. When you add people and you add, continuing obligations added to your tax bill, that never goes away. And so we understand that the schools think that they need an assistant principal at the high school. We understand that they think that they need an assistant superintendent in the district office, in addition to their school business manager. But those are things that are I would say wishes as far as versus things that we, are necessary and will hit our tax bills at some point, whether we like it or not. So when we make decisions about what to present for to be included in our warrant and then also on our ballot, we need to be very careful as far as the amount of money that we add to our budget for this upcoming year.
I don't think that's in question at all. I mean, I think it's more a
I just
function of.
need to lay it out because,
Yeah.
we're considering adding, when you look at the tax impact of, for the median homeowner in Harvard, if you add 1.3 million for a tax override, it's $630. And that doesn't seem like a lot of money. But then when you consider that we're going to be adding 5x that for the water connection to Devon's, and then the 22, 23, however many million dollars for a new fire station, and then the numbers become, they really go pretty high in a fairly short period of time. So I'm just saying, like, we need to be careful about what we add. I'm not saying that the requests aren't valid, but at the same time, like, it's not just this bit, it's all the bits
Yep.
connected.
Well said, Charles. The thing that I think we need to understand is tier one. My lights go out at 7. Isn't that great? Tier one is what we need for level service, right? That's established is what, at least on the town side, that 184,000 is indicating that that's what's needed for level service. And you have a tier 2 of 235,000 from the town side of requested items that are apparently new. So do we want to take a stab at, we can certainly look at items on the town side. The schools is a number. We all know that they manage to that number. Where would we like to start establishing the line for what we'd like to provide? And then it's also a question I have philosophically is, do the townspeople, this is an ongoing debate, I think, on the select board. Do we want the town people to be able to indicate something, or do we not want to put everything out there because we feel it's fiscally imprudent? So that's a question I think that has to get answered tonight. What is our town? We all represent different constituencies. Where are we going to land on what we're going to allow people to vote on as well?
I can share, if everybody doesn't mind, I can share my list of priorities that I saw from the town side.
Are we ready to go there, Don and Cara and Rich? You guys want to say something before we start digging into the numbers, or are you ready to propose numbers and talk about what we might want to have as priorities?
I think we need to provide, context for the townspeople. I mean, this is the 14th budget cycle I'm going through with the town of Harvard, and they've gotten increasingly more difficult. We spent probably 12 years, just not doing maintenance on buildings and cutting and not adding. And we've gotten to a point now where the structural component of our deficit is not really sustainable. And there's two ways out of it. You either generate revenue, and we're fairly limited in what we can do. I think the planning board's doing a nice job trying to change zoning regulations, try and track, different types of housing and commercial income, but that takes time. We don't really have other revenue sources. We can't raise fees that are going to make a material difference here. So, we have a revenue shortfall, and we have expenses that we can't control that are growing, and that is our contractual obligations on salaries and COLAs and our health and our pension benefits. And one of the ways, we can affect those growing expenses that, like health benefits and pension benefits, is by trying to control staffing. That being said, I think, I'm in favor of almost all of the staffing ads that we have in this year's budget. I think, to not do them, I don't think is level service. I think it's going backwards. I think we're doing a disservice to the citizens by not providing some of the positions and some of the hours and some of the extra things. So I'll probably agree with a lot of the things Charles wants to add there. On the school side, we can't really control what they do. And I think they've done a very good job this year. I think, increasing fees and doing things to generate revenue on their end and also, cutting where they can. But I think long-term, the only way we get out of the structural deficit is to look at staffing levels and maintain, as lean a staffing level as we can, and then look for ways to increase revenues. There's kind of no other way out of it, but that's kind of the higher level thing.
Susan Mary, may I just, would it be helpful if I, through the chair, would it be helpful if I did share that quick Excel spreadsheet just to show everybody?
That's fine. That would help people understand what we're.
Yeah, just as we start talking about, different levels of an override, I think it might be useful for this information. So I actually asked Jared to pull together what it would look like if we had a full override for the 1.37 million. Then, what it would look like for FY27, incorporating a lot of variables that obviously they're not fully known at this time. And I appreciate what Alice had stated earlier, but this was information that Jared had compiled together with a lot of the, assumptions that we make on an annual basis. So just, can everyone see that okay? Is it big enough?
Yeah.
All right, so if we had a full FY26 override of 1.37 million, our projected deficit for FY27 is still 1.24. So if we, I don't want to go through the budget, the warrant articles, but we're all familiar, I think, with, and we'll discuss that later on, the projected deficit article to fund pension. Then that would bring it down to 1.07 million. And the difference in those two numbers are obviously 175,941. Similarly, if we passed or if the town passed a $1 million even override for FY26, then the projected deficit for FY27 at this point would be 1.6 million. And subsequently, if the budget override was only 750 for this fiscal year, the budget deficit for next fiscal year in FY27 is proposed to be 1.88 million. So just keep those numbers in context, I guess, as we're discussing this, just as a FYI.
Dan, the question I have for you on that one is if we do a 750,000, right, that's going to entail salary, that'll entail cuts to people and positions. The 1.8, does that take that into account that our staffing levels will be lower?
They will be slightly lower, but it's not going to be a grave amount by any means.
And the biggest drivers on these things are the fixed costs of insurance, or not fixed, but insurance that you can't get out of. You've got special education costs, you've got transportation costs, you've got committed costs of previous projects. Is that fair?
Correct. Yes. Yeah. And again, there's a lot of assumptions here, no different when we do other projections in the town, even from one fiscal year to the next. There's a lot of assumptions. We still don't even know at this point if we're going to have any 9C cuts coming in the future. So there's still a lot of unknowns at this point, but this is, I think, it's just a good, quick down and dirty analysis.
Okay.
Just so we know where we stand. So.
And
members have questions for Dan on this?
And this, Dan, also those numbers account for anything that's coming off, like the roof repairs to the Bromfield School and so forth, some of those heavy duty items that we've been carrying for a while.
Yes, through the chair. Yeah, so Jared's using his roll-up document, which has all that stuff projected out. So yes, he's accounting for everything that's known at this given time.
Okay. Any other questions for Dan on that? Okay, so
thank you for allowing me to do that.
Yeah, thanks, and thank you to Jared for putting that together. Other thoughts?
I think we have to find a way. Obviously, the structural deficit isn't anything new. It's just that over time, it seems like these overrides are getting higher and higher because of either our contractual obligations, or we just, in order to run the town, we need more staff to do so. But I'm a little concerned only because, and I'm trying to find out what the balance is, because I think right now we're in a period of instability on several different levels. And I'm very sensitive to the schools and maintaining the top quality education that we've all, for most of us, have benefited from. On the other hand, we have to balance that with people who are on fixed incomes. And I understand that the dislocation is going to be that much greater next year. But I'm hoping that there's some sort of a middle ground and we can all sharpen our pencils a little bit more. And I'd like to see, again, Charles's list. I had a chance to see it earlier, and I agree with many of the items he's listed there. So I'm hoping that there's a way to kind of find a middle ground. Not everybody can get what they want, but hopefully we can find a way. But ultimately, I think we need to have some sort of a real summit to get together and understand what are the short and long-term investments or things that we can do to address the structural deficit, because it's not anything new. It's been around for a long time. So that would be my hope.
Okay, thanks, Cara. Before we jump into numbers, Rich, anything you want to add to the conversation?
No, nothing that we haven't touched upon here. I think we do have a structural deficit. Maybe it's been around for a while. It hasn't been recognized for a long while. When I was on this board 3 years ago, the chair said we did not have a structural deficit. So we may be around for a while, but no one's recognizing it until recently. This equation of a high-quality school just limited to Harvard and very little commercial in town, that equation no longer works. We have a structural deficit that cannot be, and Dan, those numbers are frightening, 1.8 potentially next year. So there's no way out of this aside from cutting. We're not taking over Devon's anytime soon. If someone's telling you that, that's false. We're not going to be getting revenue as we hoped from the state for that anytime soon, if at all. So the only way out of this short term is cutting and hopefully looking for additional resources and revenue in the out years. For the school, I think it's easy to blame the school, but they've been hit by a perfect storm of inflation, increasing insurance and increasing transportation costs that, to Abby's point, all communities are being faced with. However, those aren't going to change. And so they're running essentially a $750,000 deficit. And that may not even change with cuts. So, for the school, I would, Susan Mary, you and I have talked about this, we have a structural deficit. We need to be addressing structural issues, exploring class sizes, reevaluating, do we need the school and the school model? And even potentially regionalization. I mean, those are the kind of topics we need to be talking about because I don't see another way out of this. In terms of budget, what FinCom proposed, all of it's needed, I'm sure.
I misunderstood you. All what?
What's that?
All that are needed is what?
I'm not clear what you're asking me, Susan.
I just didn't understand what you said. Sorry.
I think you mean everything in the 1.3 is just.
Yeah, everything in the 1.37.
Got it. Thank you.
Potentially needed.
Yeah.
But we can't afford it. So I'm happy to hack through what Charles sent. He's going to put up, and he shared it with me, and I'm aligned with much of that. But we can't 1.4 million this year in an override and then come back to the town for $1 million override next year.
I mean, I think Kara mentioned
showed us what our interest was last year when we presented 3 tiers, and school committee pushed very hard for a tier beyond that. So potentially 3 tiers. And the town came back and said, we don't support anything above, I think it was 400,000 roughly, give or take. So my concern is the 1.4 will not pass, but I'm happy to put it out there for folks to vote on. But I think we need a plan B.
Yeah, I mean, given our experience last year with 420, 720 getting voted down, I don't think putting a 1.3 is a good idea. It will put us into a very, very bad position.
Okay, so do we want to, you're welcome to start with Charles's sheet if we want to go there. I mean, we need to start looking at actual numbers and what the priorities might be to keep some of these things and what we can align on.
Charles, you want to share your list?
Yeah, I'll share. I mean, I'll share it. Sure. It's
Yeah, Julie, can you turn sharing on, please?
I got it. I think it's on.
Well, it wasn't.
Just while Charles is bringing that up, I just want to make the point. It's not the kind of thing we can cut our way out of it in 1 year. You know what I mean? This is a problem that we have to address in multiple years and take bites out of it. And my proposal is that for next year's budgeting cycle, we do a more collaborative and open budget between the two of us, the schools and the town. We have to seriously look at staffing because that's what's driving a majority of our deficit is in the, is in the healthcare costs, which we can't control, pension costs, which we can't control. Those are the variables that really are a big part of the drivers. And, staffing needs in the school, have to be looked at and clearly, we can't, create a school system that doesn't work, but we either have to make it work in a way that we can afford it, or we have to look at a different option. I mean, and that's a long-term thing. Again, nothing's going to be done in a single year. We got to look, multiple years and start to do some really strategic planning to get out of the structural deficit.
Right. I think you're right, Don. I would like to have seen a process this year where the finance committee and the select board and the school committee all sat together to look at these things. In order to make a difference in staffing at the schools, you're going to have to cut too deep into the schools to actually get what you want. You'd have to cut probably 11 teachers. And that would just be catastrophic to the school district in 1 year to do that.
Well, I think you have to look long term, and we have to model those things and see.
I'm not saying
it may be hard to swallow, but maybe it can be done over time. But I think you have to look at getting control over it.
Yeah, I think, and I'm not sure who said it earlier, but I think we have to look at, can we afford to keep Harvard undeveloped the way that it is and a world-class school district that's, just ours? That's the R word that no one ever wants to talk about. Certainly I didn't want to talk about it on the school committee, but are there some cost benefits if kids in Harvard get to stay in Harvard and we get to address this structurally? Because I don't want to see that many cuts either. What is there a path forward to providing the services that we want to provide and still maintain Harvard's, primary objectives?
No, that's the balance.
Right. Okay, Charles, you got the power to share your screen?
Yep. I'll do it. Okay, so for the town side, these are the things that I prioritized. So originally I kept in the finance receptionist, but after kind of reconsidering, just part of the issue that we're having is it's not just paying for the position this year, it's the ongoing costs of having a position. So I did take that out after sending it to a couple people today. So I apologize for that. So basically my override request for the town side would be about $260,000. Those items.
So it's everything in yellow?
Correct.
You're keeping. Okay.
Yeah. The beach, we can consider perhaps raising revenues by, increasing user fees at the beach. So, maybe reducing the impact of that request or, being able to fund the beach director out of those funds. OPEB, we have been funding the increase in funding that was recommended several years ago, kind of an ongoing increase in our OPEB funding that can be funded out of free cash. So
okay,
those are the things I thought were important to maintain current services, COA, library, continuing to support the DPW, David at the DBW needs an admin. That's the only new position that I'm willing to support from the town side, given the number of projects he will be having to handle, number one, and also he's a good hire, and we definitely want to keep him. So, an organization as large as DPW can't be run just by the director fielding phone calls and, doing all the stuff, that
It's
he shouldn't be
also-
doing. So
It's also critical to being able to comply with grants and doing grant applications and stuff. So that's a big part.
Yep. So I understand the impact, as far as what we were just talking about, our continuing increasing impact of post-employee benefits and pension, but I think it's a necessary thing. We've gone as far as we can go in that department without having some assistance for the director.
Yep, I'm aligned on that as well.
Yeah, and I went through the same process as Charles. The only addition I added in mine is I'd like to somehow see, and Charles probably hit on, maybe Park and Rec needs to evaluate beach fees again, but, a way to get a beach director. I mean, that's a position that's fairly critical to the operation of the beach. So that was the only other thing I had in mind.
And just on that, Park and Rec voted last night to raise the fees on lessons and several things. That still will not get them any close to 15,000. They're running a deficit in terms of the beach staff. So while that was my hope that we could raise the fees and cover the beach director that way, we cannot. And to Don's point, that's a critical position. A lot happens.
Willing to add it
during the summer.
Willing to add that, just because of its minimal impact on, post-employee stuff.
Yeah, I added that in, Charles, and it comes out
No,
to 286, I think, when you add.
But an important point there is that if the participation lessons go up, I think by year 2 or 3, this position does become self-funding through the fees.
Yep.
But right now there's such a deficit with the beach staff that it wouldn't cover the beach director, let alone all the deficit for the beach staff. But it could in future years. So it's one of the few things we have that actually could pay for itself if we implement it. So that's why plus we need the beach director to be doing the beach programs that the town has come to rely on.
This may be silly, but do they need the full 15 if we're going to do the fees to get out of the hole?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Not silly, Claire. All questions are good questions, dear Mary.
Yeah.
The other one would be the training. Is the training for the new officer or the training for police officer? If you remove the police officer, which nobody wants to do, but I am in alignment with it, do you need the training? Was it training for the new officer or is it training for the whole?
No, it's just training generally. They've never had a training budget.
Yeah.
No, I think that's important just as a nod,
Okay.
If I'm unwilling to support the new officer, I think it's a good thing to show support for the department to provide the training budget because they've had to rely on donations and in the past for that. So
13. So the 13 is just it comes off. So the only thing that you haven't highlighted is in the tier 1 is the 13,000 for the adding Hudson to the regional dispatch.
Right.
Do we just not need that?
I didn't have enough information.
Okay.
Dan, can you provide a
about
little more context?
Yeah, I apologize. What was, can you repeat that question?
The 13,000 for the savings from adding Hudson to the regional dispatch. We don't get it, I guess, if we don't spend 13,000. Can you talk about that
No,
line?
that's actually a credit back.
It's a savings, yes. By Hudson joining the regional dispatch, we saved 13,000.
That's correct. Yeah, through the chair. 100% correct.
So why does it show up as an expense in here?
Yeah, it should be backed out. If it shouldn't be included in the total on that number, it should be backed out.
Okay.
Well, we won't add it.
Figure that.
Yeah.
All right. Any other discussion on these items? I thought, well, yep, we're not doing that. We are doing that.
So,
This matches a lot of what I had proposed. Carl?
and people are comfortable with, we've seen increased stress on the Board of Health and all the things that they're doing with respect to the pond monitoring and, of course, Triple E and whatever, all the different things, particularly during the summer months. So we're okay with just losing that 10,000 for the additional hours for the admin.
I think we,
I
we
think
bumped
you
them
had a
up last year,
conversation.
didn't we?
I think we did. Yeah.
I'm pretty confused about it. I thought we had voted for a full-time position for, but then the person that had occupied that position didn't want to work
They didn't
full-time
think
hours.
they didn't think they'd
They
use
didn't
all those
wanna.
hours or something.
Yeah.
Dan or
Right, so-
Ally, can you talk about the need and if you would support not having those extra hours?
Ella, do you want to take that one?
Sure. We can't speak to the history of whether or not additional hours were voted. I do know that the person that held this position before, I believe, had at one point wanted additional hours, and it wasn't made an opportunity for her. I don't know what year that was. I don't know much about the history. I do know that adding additional hours per week changes the structure of the position, and if it goes over 20 hours, it's a benefited position. So there are additional costs to that as well.
Okay.
Yeah, the previous person was was this past fiscal year, I thought, and they wanted some more hours because they were covering a lot of different things, but they didn't want to bump all the way up to full time. And I don't know what happened with it after that.
Okay.
To be honest with you.
Okay.
We always
Yeah,
asked for
the chair,
25 hours last year, and he changed the request. Bragan changed the request to 35, and that was more than the previous person wanted to do. And
Right.
I think that
Yeah, I think
Libby
the hours they wanted would have put it into that benefit eligible. So we
Right.
just, instead of 35 hours, just go to 40. I mean, it's benefit eligible. So
It was
that position. And then they said, well, we don't need that many. And I don't know what happened after that.
Libby Levison can tell us. She has her hand up.
Sure, Libby?
Hey, Lib.
Thank you. So we have actually asked for additional hours for the Board of Health for 6 years now. Last year, we asked to go up to 25 hours. That request was changed in the budget without consultation with the Board of Health to 35 hours. We did not need 35 hours and we could not justify that request. But then what happened is in the tier system, that got put into the second tier and it was not voted through. The situation I find myself in now is that our very experienced admin took a new position. Our calculation was that we needed 25 hours a week so that she could keep up with the work. We now have a brand new admin, and I honestly don't know how many hours we need to get the work done. I am more than happy to come and talk to the select board at some point in time, but we're not making things up. We have numerous regulations that we have to implement, both local, state, and local and state, and we don't have the time to do it all and to do it equitably. Just as one example, people are required to do water quality tests when they sell their house. People and realtors who know that test is required do it. We don't have time to go through the house sales in Harvard to track down people who are selling houses who aren't doing the water quality tests. And that's just one, not in the interest of public health and not equitable. Thank you for letting me explain. I'm happy to answer any questions.
That's good info, Libby, because I was thinking those hours were updated. So that's good to.
So how many hours do they currently do?
19.
We currently have 19 hours a week.
Sorry. Okay.
19. So I don't know if we're shown that it's $10,800 for the 6 additional hours, but I think the problem was that was realized last year was that you put it up to 25, then you get into benefits eligible. And I didn't know if the 10,800 in the spreadsheet actually took care of all of the money required to cover that benefit, that benefits eligible position. So I don't think it's 10.8. I think it's higher, because last year what we
10.8 salary, yeah.
Yeah, that's correct, through the chair. That is correct. Yeah, it does not cover.
So that, I mean, yeah, so it's not just 10,800, it's more than that. Last year we budgeted in the second tier override $20,800 for the additional hours for the.
Even so, do people feel comfortable with the 10,000 for that? Given that.
Yeah, I mean, it's that's fine. I personally am 10-4, sure.
Yeah, I would support it as well. I mean, I was thinking that they got extra hours last year and we could hold off, but to Libby's point, I think they're, they need that.
Through the chair, can I just make a comment? Relative to the budget, I would like to just, I know we're going through the exercise and looking at the override tiers that were presented in all individual department line items. I would just like to see more focus on I guess a dollar value, because we can, through the administrative staff, myself and Ally, excuse me, we can work with each individual department head and departments on where we can make improvements and cuts, instead of going line by line and looking at each individual department specific. That's just my advice.
Do you have a recommendation, Dan, of what you can manage to?
I would rather not defer to say that.
Fair question.
I know that.
I think it's important to go through. I think it's important to go through line by line, to see like what we, value.
Yeah. Otherwise, we're throwing a dart at a number. I think, going through this process at least gets you to a number. And then you can either go lower or go higher, but there's got to be some rationale behind what we come up with number wise.
I mean, for years, we can continue to just, now that, really now that the school special education, unforeseen special education funds are now, reside in the school. We don't have to increase our snow and ice funding. Because we now have the full $350,000 of the.
Not yet, though, Charles, right? Or when does that take effect?
It will be recycled
Next year. Okay,
July 1st. So
all right.
we don't need to increase. I mean, I for years, on the finance committee, I was like, we need to increase. We never once spent less than we had budgeted for snow and ice, and this is back in 2016, 2017. We were always exceeding our budget, and I had suggested back then to like build an increase in. But I mean, at this point, since we now have the full 350 to deal with that, then either we should reduce the forgetting the name of the fund where we get the money for snow and ice overage, but we could either reduce that or we could take out the snow and ice line and not build it into the budget, and then we would have the additional 25 for the Board of Health and the beach. That's totally fine. It's probably a better idea anyway.
It's not additional 25, it's just additional 10, right?
No, for beach.
Oh no, but the beach 15 and the Board of Health 10, and then axe the snow and ice. So, what you have. Yeah, I mean, what you end up.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, Charles. Dan, can we verify that through Jared that switch is happening and we don't necessarily need to increase that snow and ice 25?
Yeah, we definitely don't, through the chair, we definitely don't need to increase it.
Okay.
It's just typically communities, my prior history, we like to look at 7 and 10 year averages, because you got to come up with the deficit every year anyways. And if it's underfunded, which most communities do underfund, because it's one of those line items that you can't reduce through the process because of its emergency services. So we can keep it at those levels, yes.
I think the other day that Jared said we'd only expended a small amount out of the stabilization fund, so there's plenty in there, I mean, for this year. And snow and ice will be over, but I think you're right, Charles, there may be wiggle room there to.
So, get all of those things, getting rid of snow and ice, including Board of Health and
That's a wash.
yeah, and the beach. I come up with a town side override number of $260,835. And then, with our, kind of standing split of revenues between the town and the school, 1/3 for town, 2/3 for schools. Come up with a school side override of $521,000, $521,670. And then for a grand total of $781,670. That's about $375 annually for each average homeowner.
Say that again, Charles. What was the average for the homeowner?
That's about $375.
Mm-hmm.
Huge cut.
But Charles, are you positioning that as a tier one?
Yeah, I think a tier one override, and then I guess we can present the full boat override to the voters. I mean, I wouldn't be against doing that, presenting the full override as an option for people to speak their mind on. There's not a lot of townside stuff that, I mean, I guess we could do, if you want to do a second tier that would include the new police officer, to have a second option for people and then a third option, but I don't know if it's enough difference. I mean, the police officer is a big ticket item. $83,000 for the town side is a lot.
What you could do, Charles, is you could do a tier 2 with the schools minus the 207, which is what they wanted to do. Debating new, not new. You could just simply add in a second tier for the additional school. So if you took 911, hang on.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, so it would be, 1.16 is about, with some dollars.
What they wanted 900,000 more, right? Initially
900, 112.
Right. So take 207 off of that. Right.
They're talking 700.
Well,
is that when it gets down to 725? No,
right.
sorry.
And then you're going to take off whatever you're allowing them, which is 521.
I mean, the difference between their tier one ask and their full ask is only $55,000. So I mean, it's not a huge difference.
Right, I understood. I'm trying to give them give them some buffer of not the 900, not having to go to the 1.3, right? Because
yeah, I mean that's. So I know we just have had a custom over the last few years of splitting revenue, kind of equitably between the town side and the school side.
I understand. I'm just trying to propose a tier 2 that would give the schools back what they need for level service.
Yeah, I mean,
because we've almost granted everything for level service to the town except for the police officer. Right?
No, I mean level service for the level service for the town is not the tier 1 override really.
No,
So
but
like
it's the tier 2, isn't it not? And we've given quite a few things from tier 2.
Not a big fan of this level service because it's such a
I understand.
Yeah.
But you go where I'm trying to get. I'm trying to,
Yeah.
to
Right,
let the school population or let the schools have an option or a chance that perhaps we've got this wrong and people are willing to pay for it. Maybe not, but it needs to, if we can get it in front of the voters of, okay, here's more for what we can offer for the schools, because that's a huge cut. It's a huge number of teachers that are going to have to go or somewhere to take $400,000 out of what they're asking.
So, shoot, I messed that up.
I think that gives, I mean, it gives, with the 2 tiers, it would give voters the opportunity to do that. And because if we only go with 1 tier, and that, let's say it's the largest tier, then if that fails, then we're really back to the drawing board. So I think there's a value in having those 2 tiers and getting that assessment.
So Susan Mary, would you be okay with the tier as recommended by FinCom and then
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. The 207.
The 207.
Take that off of the difference between what they've asked for and what we're allocating in tier 1.
Okay.
Which I think I can't run a meeting and do spreadsheet at the same time.
I understand.
Very good spreadsheets.
You know, we're at 1.1 something for the top tier and 781 for the lower tier. Ballpark.
We're gonna need to, we might know.
I think we need to, I thought it was higher than 781 at this point. Is that wrong?
Susan Mary, I was on vacation last week. What's the 207 you're talking about?
207 it wasn't completely agreed upon, but it was what the schools identified as new at the earlier time when they were going through the finance process.
Gotcha.
The special education teacher and, sorry, I'm not calling off the top of my head very well, but there were 2 items that really are mandated. Oh, the 77,000 for the curriculum materials really are mandated. Both are not necessarily a choice, but they are not something that was in place. So they took those out of the bucket of optional kind of thing, or new, and put it back in the fundamental. So the fundamental became like very small, but if you put those back in, I'm just looking for a rational way of a number here.
Yeah, and I see what you're doing.
So if we did from the difference, 572.
Well, we need to present the things that we want to have included.
In where?
We probably need in a memo to give to Jared and have him.
I mean, from the town side.
Yes,
Right.
from the town side, and nail this down from our requests. What I'm not comfortable with is a 20-80 split of revenue. You know, something where it's completely imbalanced towards the school side. We haven't done that in the past. We haven't had to have, besides last year, we haven't had to have an override, but we need to maintain our spending balance and between the 2 parts of the town. And there's still I still have questions about, you know, some of the decisions as far as hiring or, you know, positions that are being filled. So it was determined that the high school didn't need a math teacher, but then that position was then directed, and that money or that person was directed into an assistant principal position. So if you don't need the math teacher, in my opinion, not as an educator, I bank the money, and I then don't hire an administrator to sop up the money that was not spent on the teacher. So
yeah, I don't think we want to go there, Charles.
I know we don't want to go, but what one of the, you know, Susie in her public comment said that we don't have any power to determine what's the, you know, the appropriate amount of spending that the school, I mean, at a certain point, we must have control over the budget that is sent to the school. I found her statement to be really problematic in saying, like, what if they want to pay the superintendent $500,000?
No, what they're saying, and
But if they present us a budget where the newly, the newly approved superintendent salary is $500,000, like, based on Susie's logic, we don't have any ability to argue against that, and then we just have to give them the money that they request. So I'm just saying, like, it was an interesting maximalist position to take. The select board has to have control over the total budget that's being presented, both to the town and also funding that is given to the schools. I'm not arguing the point that all of these positions are necessary. I'm just saying, like, the statement didn't seem to be correct, and I'm not certain.
I think I can clarify. I think I can clear it up a little bit.
Well, I would want to validate. I mean, I would want to validate I would want to see what their attorney actually said, and also have our. I mean, I don't really want to get a meeting of attorneys, because that's not exactly a cheap situation to deal with. But I just didn't appreciate the sentiment, the statement that says that we have no control over the amount of money that we're giving to the schools. I just didn't think that was a great way to start our budget talks off today, or.
Got it. Okay, so hang on. Let's back up 1 second. I think lawyers are going to disagree on this, but with technically what the lawyer presented was a lifting of a statement from Mass General Law saying that the appropriations must be voted on by the governing legislature. It really means and I love Liz Valerio, but in this instance, I think it's a little bit out of context, because what it means is you can't dictate how the funding is spent. The full appropriation does get to be negotiated between the finance committee or the select board before it goes to the town meeting. Susie was implying that if you took simply a portion of that statement, is that whatever they presented had to go towards the town for them to be able to vote on it. Doesn't mean we had to appropriate it. Their position, Liz's position is that whatever they come up with as a budget and they vote on, it has to be offered to the town meeting to vote on.
Has that been tested?
No, and I've been around the budget a long time. I'm not sure I would even agree with that statement, because I do think what the intent of that section of the MGL is that you couldn't force them to use the appropriations in any particular way. So
we've always understood that once the money is given to the schools, we have no say in how it's spent. I mean, nobody's ever argued that, but you have to have the discussion about whether or not all the positions that have been hired for and that are currently
true. And the Commissioner of Education indicated that the school budget would go through a negotiation process between the Finance Committee and the school committee, and then they would agree on something, and then that would go before the town to vote on.
The way that our charter is set up is that the Finance Committee suggests to the select board what they think the budget should be, and then we say, cool, thank you for your input, and this is what we're going to do.
Right, we have a different process than.
Yeah, you could potentially have two budgets presented, a FinCom budget and a select board budget per our charter. But I think, I think there is a collaborative, there's been a collaborative process this year, I will say, between the schools and at least the finance department. And I think the finance committee did a pretty good job working with the schools on it. So can we be better? Absolutely, 100%. And we're striving to do that every year, but
The charter says explicitly that it's the select board's budget, and we take input from the finance committee. It used to be the finance committee's budget.
Right.
But once the charter was passed, it's the select board's budget. So
right. So I just wanted to,
and so that's what we're doing right now.
Right.
Yeah, and I think, Charles, the other point, I think on the revenue split, I think that I'm totally on board with that, and I think that's the guideline. But I think there's going to be years where you're going to have heavier needs on one side or the other for various reasons. So while it's a guideline, I think we gotta be a little flexible around it. So I think there's a lot of things on the town side that I personally think, if we don't do, we're not providing level service. I mean, all those things we just voted to add. I think not doing them is not, providing the right service level to the town.
Yeah. I agree. But we're going to get into a revenue slide. If we continue to fund the schools at a higher percentage than the town side, their budget is largely personnel, and then we continue to get into a cycle where
absolutely agree.
We're paying the benefits and the post-employee benefits, like that's also not sustainable. So I mean it's certainly self-serving as far as trying to maintain a semblance of a budget, where we're not asking for overrides every year. So
Well, we will be at this rate. I mean, there is no way to structurally fix this
keep on adding people. We're gonna certainly have more.
Even without adding people, Charles. Even
I
without
agree.
adding people, we
I
are.
totally no. I agree, but adding people is a recipe for having a unvirtuous cycle.
Well, we've just added hours on on the town side, and we've added a.
We have one admin for a department that hasn't ever had an admin, and I think that person will pay dividends as far as allowing our Department of Public Works director to actually direct his attentions to important things.
Okay, so does someone have a recommendation on the tiered overrides if we're going to do that? We've got one tier at 521,670, which covers the items on the town side that we talked about, and a 60-30 split for the 40.
I think that's not enough.
I thought we were closer to 780 based on my math.
I wrote down what Charles told me. So what do we have?
It was the school part of the override that was 520.
And then you had the 240 from the town side ish. Anyway, Charles, read the numbers out, but
let me tell you.
Closer to 780 total.
I have it. I closed the window. Sorry.
I wrote down town side 260, school 521, 670 for a total of 781, 670.
Yeah, that's what I had.
And I hate to be a downer on this, but let's also remember we're asking the town to vote on a $200,000 override for the pension revolving fund.
If we agree to it.
Right. We're also taking free cash money for reimbursements on things. So, we got to look at the whole perspective. There's a lot of money moving around.
No, I get it. I'm purely talking about the optics.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
So town side override 268.35. And school side override 521.670.
Okay, that is tier 1. Do we want to offer a tier 2? And if so, what do we do? We've everyone, the FinCom recommended allowing to go forward the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
We could
I'm
put
fine with bringing it up.
I think you honor that and you make that the next option.
Okay.
I mean, it shows that we're looking at it. We're trying to make cuts where we can, but we have the option of doing the whole thing.
Okay, so it's 1.38 whatever. 1.374389. We'd have to tweak the numbers, I think, for the warrant, because if we're not doing the credit to the Hudson thing, there's little things here and there that just need to be checked. 1.374389. Okay, so we have.
If we're gonna go for the full override, we should certainly include the OPEB increased funding, as opposed, because we steal it from free cash and then we don't have that money to spend on capital. So, I mean, if we're going to go for it, may as well
Yeah, that's a warrant article. I'm not necessarily aligned on that. We always over budget free cash. We have a healthy free cash. We have a system that's working, and we're now asking people to spend more in a year that's already tough. So I'm not necessarily aligned on the 200,000.
I agree. I agree with that too. Yeah, I think that we use the free cash for the 200,000, and we have to look at and manage what our long-term investments.
I don't think we're over budget on free cash. So the state recommends that you have about 5% of your omnibus budget be free cash every year. As we increase our omnibus budget every year, our free cash is starting to bump up against that lower side of 5%. So I don't think it's I don't think we're like swimming in free cash.
It's certainly been a healthier number than from 10 years ago when I was on the Capital Committee.
But
it's trending.
We had 1 year that was like a bumper crop because we had a tax amnesty thing, but we've been essentially right in line with 5% for as long as I've been on either select board or finance committee. And then last year we were actually this year that we're operating in, we were actually low because we had to refill the reserve fund entirely because of the unforeseen special education expense and snow and ice. So I don't think we should be paying. I don't think we should be filling this benefits account using free cash.
Okay.
I think in this year where it's a sort of a strange time and there's instability and so forth, to do it this year might be a good choice to kind of balance out, because we are looking at so much. We obviously have big things to address going forward, and I agree that we shouldn't be doing this every year to fund this type of budget item or this type of entity. But nonetheless, I think this year it's not a bad year to just backfill that with that.
Right, it's new. I mean, we're adding it in a year that we're also saying we don't have the funds to do what we would like to do for level service even. So that's where I'm at.
Yeah.
All right, we good on the numbers?
Yeah, the tier one number, the tier one number is doing all level service for town.
Tier 1 is at 781,670, and it is all of the tier 1 and some of the tier 2 that we've discussed tonight. And then the full override would be 1.3 million, 1.374389 million. Okay. Any other thoughts on this, or is this ready for a vote?
Okay.
Okay.
I move to recommend the 2 tiers as indicated.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Okay, we'll do it by roll call vote. I'm just gonna who's ordered the screen. So Cara.
Aye.
Don.
Aye.
Charles.
Oliver, aye.
Rich.
Aye.
And I'm an aye. All right, thanks everyone. And now we are going to move on to the warrant. Dan circulated a draft of the warrant articles earlier today. I'm not sure I printed out the real version, but Dan, we're going to go through this one by one. Yes, that's typically the process we do this, so we have to approve each one.
Yes. Yep.
Okay, and do we vote? The plan is to vote on the warrant articles in 2 weeks. Not our support of them. I think that comes later, or do we have to do that by the 18th as well, Julie? Whether we are in support of a particular article, that's later, right? Because that goes.
We can do that later.
Yeah, you can do that later. Yeah.
Okay, great. So it's just finalizing things. So we can look at this tonight. We can ask Dan to 2-week anything, or if we have questions about it, and then we need to approve it on the 18th.
Right.
We also don't need to approve or vote on the warrant articles individually. take them as groups. You know, if there's nothing that's
Right.
That's fine.
We typically don't vote
Yeah.
on or do any of the
More
planning
money
board.
items, right?
Yeah.
The money items, I think we do.
Yeah, those are the ones we generally chime in on.
Okay.
All right, would you like me to, through the chair?
I
want
would
me
love you to
name and go through?
share and,
The big document, so I apologize, but
oh no, that's planning board's fault, not yours.
A lot of pages.
and there are some that are still some voids in there. So again, I apologize for that too, but we'll I'm still tweaking it. And I know I've talked to most of you, but I also want to be on record here tonight to say that I'll pull this together as much as I possibly can before I leave. As you know, I'm leaving for a break on the 13th, and I'll be coming back late on the 17th, and then we have our meeting on the 18th where this has to be finalized. So at that point, I will be relying on my esteemed team, being Allie and Julie, to pull the rest of it together in the final hour. So, all right, item number 1, annual reports. I don't think there's much to describe about that.
That's good.
Just stop me if you want me to comment on anything, or if you have any questions on it.
Okay.
You want me to keep
Nope,
going?
I'm good on that one. Keep going. Yep.
Okay. Article 2, pay bills from prior fiscal years. I will tell you that I do know of 2, and those are the only 2 that I'm aware of at this point. We have some outstanding Hartford insurance bills from May and June, totaling about $2,700. I don't have the exact figure on me, but we do have 2 that we'd have to vote on.
Okay.
Article number 3, Inflation Reduction Act rebate funding. So this is basically requesting $7,000 to fund an accountant who will be filing documents for the rebate on the Council of Aging photovoltaic cells that are on the roof that were recently installed. It allows us to file a rebate for $51,000 reimbursement. That reimbursement will come in after January of 2026.
So that money comes out of the stabilization fund in this current year, yeah? Right.
Correct,
after
general
town hall?
stabilization, correct.
Yeah,
Yeah.
great. Okay.
Can we mute Ms. Connolly?
Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks, Julie.
You're welcome.
Fund school grant deficit. This was we're going to transfer from available funds. It'll be the stabilization or free cash to cover a deficit resulting from overspending in the ESSER account.
Okay.
School technology reimbursement, article number 5. This is technology purchased in prior years. It was 2024. Money was spent out of the Devens Fund and reimbursed to the general fund. So the article requests reimbursement directly to back into the Devens Fund, and that'll come out of possibly stabilization or free cash.
Okay.
Article number 6, school rentals. This is basically an initial deposit into the revolving fund of $42,980 to pay for custodial services to help fund those when the school facilities are rented out and they're utilized for like items such as AlphaBest or HAA.
Well, that's based on monies that was collected for building rental, but it didn't end up in the schools.
Correct. That's
Yeah.
correct.
Great.
Thank you for that clarity.
Yeah.
This is the one that we were just talking about, article number 7. So this article is needed only if we don't cut the budget, including the override, and we have a full override. So if $22,000 stays in here in the override, then the article isn't needed. If it's cut out of the override, then the article is needed. So I think, given the override that we're discussing, I would still recommend that this stays in the budget. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but what do you need the article then after the passing of the budget so that you can
Yeah.
either take action on it or not?
Yes.
Yes, that'll have to be moved.
If it's before the budget, you're screwed.
Are we going to do it like last year where we're going to vote on the entire budget for the $1.3 million override budget?
That's a discussion that the board has to have, yes.
That's what we did that's what we did last year. We voted for the full override budget.
Well, so Jared had a recommendation that you actually vote the budget without an override.
Yeah.
And
So-
then you have the two warrant articles for the overrides, so that if the overrides don't pass, you at least have a budget. And then you'd have to go back to special town meeting to adjust the request of an override to get anything else.
Yeah, and that's
Last
the
year
way
we
you do it.
didn't require the second, we didn't require the special town meeting because we voted the full budget. And then with the understanding that if the tiers didn't pass, then the budget goes back to the next levels that passed. It seemed cleaner. It was a bit of an explanation at town meeting.
Yeah, well, hopefully we're getting better at it because we're doing a similar thing.
Yeah, we should get clarity, but I think that's right. I think you vote the baseline budget and then you have the two override tiers voted.
Okay. And then this would be after the override tiers so that it informs whether we need it or not.
Yeah, I'll move that. So, and I'll also add the, what was recently voted because we only have the omnibus budget in here. So, I'll add the two overrides as separate.
What's the advantage of doing it like this as opposed to what we did last year?
What?
Of doing it like what? I'm going to try to understand the
omnibus budget last year was voted to approve the $780,000, $720,000 top tier override that was at issue on the ballot. And then we had the tier 1 override and then the baseline budget. But we voted the max budget. We approved the max budget at town meeting.
That's a
double understanding that if at the ballot that those tiers were not approved, that only the smallest amount approved at the ballot would then go forward. So we didn't have to have the special town meeting. It avoided the special town meeting in June.
Yeah, I think Susan Mary is actually suggesting. So we vote the omnibus and then we vote both tiers afterwards. So whichever one doesn't pass, we won't have to.
Okay, it's the same concept, Charles. I mean, you basically want to have a base omnibus if both tiers don't pass at the ballot. So, whether you word it so that if the two don't pass, then it defaults to this, or whether you just do it, here's the base and then here are the two tiers, it's kind of getting you in the same place.
Yeah. I'm just wondering why we did it like that last year.
Because I think we confused everybody last year by doing it that way.
So we're trying to avoid. We're trying to avoid on
Jared came
purpose
up
what
with
we did last year.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine.
All right, so I'll move that Article 7 to after the budgets. Article 8. So this I just added recently as well. This is I had a meeting with Mass DOT today, and we need an amendment for engineering services. This language hasn't been vetted by council yet, so I have to go through that with him. However, this is an article which amends the service agreement with the engineering department, or TEC, our engineering consultant, to complete environmental permitting on the Air Road project, since we need additional environmental services from them to complete the project. That's as a result of some of the Conservation Commission items, and we have to go through the Army Corps of Engineers and have a project notification form prepared. So it's an additional $15,000 that we're going to need for that project moving forward. If we don't get that, it's going to hold up that entire project, and then we may lose our funding opportunities.
Okay.
With the tip.
Is that something that you should transfer from reserve fund? Does it need to happen soon?
We no, actually, this will fall in miraculously in line with exactly when we need to get it done. If we vote this at town meeting, then we can still be on board for the timing that we have to put the project out. So it actually works out miraculously well.
Okay.
Article number 9, transfer from certified free cash to the stabilization account. This is a transfer from free cash to stabilization to get to our 5% of the FY25 budget. That's just to top that off. It is a bylaw, I'm sure you're aware. We'll know this actual number in April, so we're not going to populate that value in here. Usually those numbers come quarterly, and we should have that by sometime early April. So we can edit that exact value on town meeting floor. Then to follow suit, Article 10 is transfer from certified free cash to the capital stabilization and investment fund. So that transfers the remaining portions of the free cash that we have left that goes into stabilization and investment fund. It's obviously to be determined beyond the 5% that we just saw in articles above. Makes sense? Any questions?
Nope.
Article 11 is appropriate cable franchise fees. This is just to fund the cable PEG services. This is out of their own funds through the money received from Charter Cable.
Okay.
Article 12 is the omnibus budget. And then after that, I'll insert the other the two-tier overrides. Article 13, performance-based wage adjustments. This is to fund the wage adjustments that were voted on at the previous select board meeting, the 0 to 3%.
Okay.
Article 14, establish and fund a pension and OPEB stabilization fund. This was also discussed tonight. So this is both pension and OPEB. This is the first, we'll be funding the pension liability. And then after that's fully funded, then we can fund the OPEB, and that'll happen sometime in 2035. So the recommendation is to start with that $200,000 in the override, and this allows us to set up that fund, and then we don't have to go to town meeting again. The select board can actually increase up to the 2.5% annually, or you can even decrease if you wish. So this will offset increases in pension funds. Pension fund costs. So the first year would just be the vote, and then at the discretion of the select board, similar to any other debt exclusion, you can just you don't have to go back to a town meeting for another vote.
Why would we have this as a separate thing if we were including it in the omnibus?
No, you wouldn't be. It would still be as an override annually, but it would not mean a would have to
But it's included in the other tier. So do we take it out of the tier
No.
just to make it simpler or not?
No, this is different.
Separate.
This is
It's
different.
not included in the tier at all. So
Not in
this
the
is
tier.
completely separate. This would be $200,000 on top of what was just voted.
Okay.
This is to help absorb unforeseen or like very high increases year over year in Worcester retirement, and it's primarily Worcester retirement.
Yeah. But so this is not the $200,000 we were talking about earlier.
No.
Okay.
No.
So
Yes.
okay, which was that article then, or there is no article associated with that? It's just an expense line item in the omnibus tier.
This article just establishes the fund, right? And Dan
No,
does fund
Jared
it.
told me that it both
This
establishes
establishes-
and allocates
Fund.
$200,000.
Yeah,
Correct.
so
Okay,
it's a Prop 2.5 override in order to fund this.
got it.
This.
Okay.
But what in the tiers, that was an additional $22,000 to put into our OPEB liability. That's
Got
a
it. Okay.
different
That's
deal.
not what I was talking about there. I was talking about this, that,
200,000.
yeah.
Yeah, this,
I have a concern about this one.
although it's a nice chunk, up front, but I think this, looks long-term at, a way to sort of, offset one of the key drivers of our structural deficit, if it happens to spike pretty high. So it's forward thinking, but, again, it costs money to get it set up.
And it basically takes it out of the general fund as well. So
Yeah.
that's where it helps.
Like, there's a
Right.
lot
I mean, the only
flexibility.
benefit of it is I know it can be invested, and so therefore it's going to might be money that grows. But taking another $200,000 from people at this year is tough to do.
Right, but it, hopefully sets us up for, helping stabilize down the road. So it's forward thinking, like I said, but it requires, some funding up front, certainly to
Yeah.
get it going.
And if it doesn't happen this year, you could bring it back another year, but it doesn't look like the funding mechanism is going to be there next year either.
Yeah.
Also,
Dan,
I
does
mean,
it have to be 200,000?
No.
Can it be a
It
smaller
doesn't-
number?
It doesn't have to be, but we're seeing the pension going up at least 10%
Yeah.
annually. That's about $175,000.
Yeah, that was Jared's calculus, is try and hedge the, average on the increases we've been seeing.
That's what I remember. Thanks, Don.
Yeah, and that's what our actuaries recommended as well.
Yeah, I mean, and also it doesn't have to be expended every year. You know, it just gets topped up every year too. So it's not,
Yeah.
it doesn't, you know, that you don't get tagged every year with that. But also the fund potential balance gets increased by 2.5% every year too. So I mean, it continues to grow with inflation. Doesn't have to be expended. So I mean, it's a very flexible way of, you know, having a pot of money to fund things that we need to spend. We have to spend money on. I mean, it's not. This is not an option.
Increases we can't control.
Yeah, but I mean, it's not magic money. We still are paying it. You know what I mean? It's not. It doesn't come from nowhere. It comes from the tax bill. But at the same time, it's defined as being for that, and you know, it grows with the levy. So.
Yeah, it's not common. I think there's no other town in Massachusetts doing it for this particular purpose, establishing this fund. It's not that it's a bad idea, it's innovative. So I give Jared credit for trying to, move us forward in the right direction. I can understand why it's a little hard to set up because you are pulling that money.
Yeah. Yeah, it's all about, how do we try and attack a structural deficit? And this is one area that, continually grows that, we need flexibility on how to deal with. And so I think it is forward thinking, and I think it makes sense, but again, it hurts up front.
Right. Okay. Okay, I understand it. We can go on to the next one. If there are any other unless there's other questions. Great.
Article 15, these are the Capital Planning Investment Committee recommended expenditures.
Yeah.
There's a list of all of them that was voted by the Capital Planning Investment Committee, CPIC.
Yep.
I don't think you want to go through each one again. do you?
No. They were presented to us.
Right, we'll do that on town meeting floor.
Yeah.
Yep. Thank you. Article 16, purchase property for recreation facility, and it's been redacted here for anyone that's looking on Zoom or via YouTube. So this is what the board was discussing at prior meeting.
Great.
Article number 17 is designate Harvard Park as parkland for recreational use. This is to see if the town will formally vote Harvard Park as a parkland, quote unquote, for recreational use. It will formally recognize it as it was intended in 2002 when they handed the park over to the Park and Recreation Commission. This was voted by the Park and Recreation Commission as well.
Okay.
Capital Planning Investment Committee debt payment. Article 18 is this is $60,000 debt payment that CPIC Capital Planning Investment Committee is committed to fund. This comes from capital stabilization to the omnibus budget. The last payment for that is scheduled for FY of 2036. I'm assuming you've seen this in the past as well.
Yeah.
Article 19 is rescind prior borrowing authorizations. I believe there's 3 separate projects here. So this is basically just a housekeeping article. And just to clarify, basically that the amounts that were voted for the project versus what was actually bonded. So these are just to close these out, the 3 items. And for the old library roof, they received a grant, so they didn't borrow the entire amount. And then school feasibility study, the MSBA authorized the entire amount, but we didn't borrow for the full amount.
Mm-hmm.
That just goes back to the bond.
Yes.
It pays out the bond early. It goes back to the principal of the bonds. Is that?
We didn't borrow it.
No, we didn't touch it. It was just allocated.
It was just allocated. So we just have to.
We're removing authority to borrow it.
Encumbered but not spent.
Unused borrowings that we didn't do any of these. I thought we just spent less on these things than we had initially authorized.
We didn't actually bond the entire amount.
Yeah, so this is the way to clear what we didn't spend, what we didn't need to spend. This is the way to clear it off.
It's different than my understanding it though too, Charles, because I thought we bonded the whole amount of the feasibility study, and the whole point was that we had borrowed extra and you could turn it back to the town and they could borrow it for other things. So if you could clarify.
This is not bonded. This is not borrowing authority that we have remaining. Yeah, I'm echoing what you just said.
Yeah, if you could just clarify that, Dan, make sure it's was not borrowed.
Yep.
Okay, that'd be great. Thanks.
Article 20. This one may come off. So that's why it's highlighted in blue. So basically, we're looking to see if the Parks was, just bear with me while I read this. So the Harvard Park Playground, I believe Parks was looking to purchase 88 picnic tables for Harvard Park. I think there was about $12,000 left to spend. I think the original appropriation was between 60 or 65,000. I don't know the exact amount. So if that doesn't get purchased by this week, then this article may come off completely.
Okay.
So I'd hold off on voting on that one. I should have verification by the end of the week. Article 21, Community Preservation Committee Report. So there's nothing that I have to explain on that, correct?
Right.
Article 22 is Community Preservation Committee recommended projects with the funding sources outlined. Article 23, Harvard Park Track debt authorization. This is to authorize debt for the entire project, and then $600,000 coming from CPC.
Yeah. Okay.
Article 24, this is just to vote the enterprise funds. There's a general fund subsidy for the ambulance, the water, the sewer, and transfer station. And FinCom still needs to vote this, I believe, unless they did it their last meeting. I can't recall. Did they vote that one?
Can we go back to Article 23?
Yeah.
Why?
This is CPC debt funding, right?
Correct. Yes, to authorize the debt for that entire project. But I think I don't remember the exact number. I think it's like 2.4 million for that project, and $600,000 is coming from CPC.
Charles, I'm not jiving.
Yeah. All of the money is coming from CPC.
It's just appropriating it here for that purpose.
Right. That's why I don't understand why there's a separate warrant article here, because all of the money is coming from CPA funds.
No, I believe some of it was debt. I think
CPC is going to debt fund it and then pay they'll pay the debt through the CPC funds, right? That's the way I understood it.
Yeah, but it doesn't have to get, well, all of the money is coming from CPA being bonded against CPA funds.
Yeah, I thought they were flush with cash this year, so they were able to do this without that.
I understood that they were taking out debt for the project.
What are we borrowing?
They are there, but they're borrowing against their own money. I don't know why this is separate. This should be within the CPC, the CPC slate of projects.
I think because it's a debt authorization, Charles, my guess.
Not a, but the amount of money that's being cited here is not correct.
Right. Yeah, right. The 600 is the cash.
$2.4 million is what we're CPIC is giving money to kind of buy down the initial.
Dan, can you go back up to the CPC list? What do they have there for? So they don't even have it listed there, right? So.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm unfamiliar with how, so I haven't seen a CPC debt.
Yeah.
A bonding.
It's not listed here in the general funding for recreation. It's a separate article, so maybe it has to be that way, but we should just get clarity on it.
Yeah, I'm confused about the amount of money that is being authorized here.
Okay, I'll get clarity on that. Article 24, enterprise funds. So did I already state that? Yes. So just general fund subsidy for water sewer transfer station on those enterprise funds. And Article 25. Establish building permits for revolving fund. So this will be, give us the availability to charge gas, electric, building, plumbing, wiring, in a revolving fund, which will pay, cover part of the salary of the inspector as well as the commissioner, as well as the, about $40,000 worth of the inspector's fees, the inspector's salaries for the gas, wire, plumbing, et cetera. So this will have $140,000 spending limit associated with it. Just to try and help us on the general fund side of things, so we can establish the revolving fund for some of these permits.
Okay.
And we need some clarity. Jared is actually drafting this, and he said he has that. He was trying to put that in here today, but we ran out of time. So we'll get that clarity on that language. Article 26, revolving funds. This just sets the spending limit for each one of these revolving funds. That's typical. I'm sure you see that annually as well. Nothing's changed from prior years either at this point. Article 27, acceptance of gifts of property. Whoops, did I miss that one already? No, right here. The acceptance of gifts of property. We have nothing at that point yet, so it's just a housekeeping article, so we can pass over that one at town meeting floor if there's nothing that comes to us. Article 28, acceptance of highway funds. This is another housekeeping item. This is just acceptance of state highway chapter 90 funds for expense purposes, or expenditure purchase purposes. Article 29, air road easements. That's information that I still have to populate in here. Basically, we will be accepting easements or taking easements, I should say, on the air road project. So I will insert the language, which I actually received today at 5:30 p.m. It's going to state something like they authorize the select board to acquire land and easements for the air road project. And it's quite lengthy, but I'll insert that language as well. And that is for the TIP project that's coming down.
Okay. Yep.
It just gives the select board to, take anything by eminent domain under Mass General Law, Chapter 79, I believe it is. Article 30, accept Mass General Law, Chapter 41, Sections 111M and 111N. This basically covers IOD for any EMS employees, and that'll be very similar to what we do for fire and police departments.
Okay.
IOD is injured on duty, if anyone
Thank you.
doesn't know. Article 30, was that a question that you were going to have?
No, thank you. I wrote IOD and I'm like, okay, I don't know what that means.
Article 31, amend the Code of Harvard, Chapter 24, dogs. This article is basically to amend or increase the dog fee changes as approved by the Select Board in 2020. The proposed article is aimed at cleaning up and establishing reasonable fees for dog ownership in town, and serves as a housekeeping measure to ensure that the dog licensing fees are current and consistent with decisions made by the Select Board.
Okay.
With some small changes you can see in the document. Article 32 is same chapter, and this article proposes amendment to the late fees. So if you go through this, you'll see that there's it does mention late fees in here, late fee in addition to the applicable license fees. So that's just late fees that are imposed on dog owners in town. The goal of creating a fair and more manageable fee structure for the town clerk.
Okay.
Article 33 basically is again housekeeping, proposes the removal of any outdated fee table relating to non-dog town clerk fees, allowing the select board the authority to adjust these fees as necessary going forward.
So Dan, tell me that this just wipes them off and then we got to go back and reset them. And at what point do we do them or not?
I'll have to verify that with Rose.
Because we would still want to have fees for things.
Yes.
Okay.
Is that just coming under town hall operations or under your purview, Dan, or does that come back through us?
It should go through you.
And why wouldn't, well, I guess I'm not sure we have time to establish the fees. Well, we could before town meeting. I just don't know why you'd wipe them out and then.
I
not-
think it was more, this is more of a housekeeping to take this table out because it doesn't need to be there. Not that the fees themselves would be removed, but that they wouldn't be in this document. That, yeah, I think that's it. I'm pretty sure that
Thank you, Julie.
that was
Okay.
the reason.
Okay.
I'll verify that with Rose.
You're welcome. We'll double check with Rose, but I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
Article 34, Municipal Affordable Housing Trust Charter Change. This just
We
clarifies,
voted on this the other night. Yeah.
correct, clarifies the trust from 5 people to a range of 5 up to 7. Article 35, Planning Board articles, this is where they all start. Amend the protective bylaws. This is defining, this article is defining the definitions for all of these items.
Do we want to have someone from planning board just come and walk us through these? Not now, because they're so in depth. Would that help people?
I would appreciate that. Yeah.
Okay. So Dan, taking the lift off of you, it would be probably good if we got at our next meeting, one of the planning board people to just simply help us rather than have you to read through all these, and maybe you do know them, but
Yeah, I know the gist of most of them, but yeah, if there's any particular details, then I'd defer to or yield to John McCormick.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll ask John.
thanks, Rich.
Join us. If he can't, I'll see if Doug Thornton's available, and if he can't, then Dan and I can do our best.
Okay,
Okay. All right.
so planning board.
And then you're going.
Yeah, do you mind if I just scroll
No,
right?
no, go. I
All
was
those-
trying to
Oh, go.
for you.
I think we should read them and then, read them and then have questions for
Oh,
John.
yeah, everybody should
Oh,
read them.
yeah. I thought you were gonna say.
John to go through
I
every
should
single
read
one
them.
of these.
but- So it's number 75, I think.
Page 75?
No, number, severability. Oh, yeah, I think that's the one after all,
No, it's
or are we going to, no?
yeah, the last one would have been Article 44 for planning board. And then the last article
okay,
here
yeah.
is through the Harvard Historic Commission.
Yeah.
And this is the demo delay bylaw.
Yep.
Hey, folks, like Dan, what's your thought process on if, this many articles?
10 planning articles. It's going to be a long time.
Yeah, I was,
It'd be really,
if I can be quite frank, I thought that was a lot as well. And I'm happy that we have our new town planner on board, because I think that they can help guide some of this stuff and help guide the planning board to see which ones are the most or the highest priority, and see how we can maybe act on some, 1 year and others the following year, just because I think this is going to be a heavy lift as well.
This is the reason why we used to have 2
Why we
meetings.
did too, right? It's coming back to haunt us now.
Yeah.
yeah.
Well,
if
we
you-
can schedule one.
Even if you spend just 20 minutes on each one, which is doubtful, you're looking at a long time. 10
Yep.
articles.
Yeah. Well,
And
if they don't need them all now, or they could tell us we need these 5 now and we need these other 5 in the fall, that would be helpful.
Well, we're
Agreed.
not doing the fall anymore, though.
No, I know, but maybe we need to. I mean,
Yeah, we may need to though, but
In years that we didn't have a second half of the annual town meeting, we always had a special town meeting.
That's
So
right. Yeah.
We've always had 2 town meetings. It just is a matter of what you call them.
Through the chair, would you like to set up a special meeting between now and your 18th so that we can have the planning board representative come in and go
I
through
can't
these, so
come,
you have the opportunity?
I can't be there, but don't let that stop you from having that.
It's just a thought. It's utterly up to you
I
guys.
think that would be helpful, because I don't know what other colleagues think, but basically, I think we also can help, given our collective experience, how much time it's going to take to really get through these and to help prioritize that, because I think putting these at the end of the day, my goodness, I think that's tough, especially when you're dealing with something like zoning.
yeah,
Right. It's
I
tough.
agree.
And maybe between now and then, I can also get the clarity on these other articles to you, so we can clean that up before. And then possibly you can vote on that day instead of on the 18th.
Is the thinking people would like to have John come and meet with us prior to the 18th, so we don't spend the entire select board meeting going over the articles, or do we want to wait till that, or what? Are people
I
available?
think that makes sense to do it before the 18th, because
Okay.
18th should be kind of chop, I think.
Yeah, because if we're voting on them and having to go through them and ask all the questions, that's gonna take as long as town meeting.
Okay.
And it actually might help serve better too, because if I have to switch some of the numbers, if you're voting on article numbers, then it'll be more clear at that point and they'll be defined.
Okay.
And the other thing is going through that, at least whoever's watching or the folks that watch it afterwards, is part of a further public education program. Yeah.
Right.
Good point.
All right. Do people, we can do it at the end or we can do it now in terms of scheduling, because I think that's the end of the warrant, right?
That is the end of the warrant. Yep.
Okay. Why don't we take a stab at a time, an evening, or if people want to, I can do it offline. Julie can do it offline. How do you want to schedule it? Charles said he's out of pocket next week, so.
Do it next Tuesday.
I'm gone all next week.
Yeah.
But I mean, if there's 4 of you, that's all right.
So the 11th. Does that work for Cara and Rich?
I can do the 11th. Yep.
Okay.
I can do the 11th.
Yeah, that works for me.
Okay. So let's extend I'll extend an invitation to John. Is that who?
Yeah, Susan Mayor, I can reach out to him.
Okay.
As
That'd be great.
liaison and just let him know to
Why don't you
show
send
up and
Yeah.
walk with us.
If you want to send an email and copy me, then I'll know. Great, thank you. Okay.
Susan Mary, through the chair, did you also want a representative from Historic regarding that demolition bylaw?
No, because they came and presented that to us already.
Okay.
I mean, I don't. Do any other members need to hear from Historical?
No, I think that one's pretty.
It seemed
Has
pretty
it changed at
straightforward.
all? It hasn't changed since we saw it.
Doesn't seem to have been changed.
I don't believe so.
Then I'm fine with it.
Okay,
Yeah, the only
great.
changes that I received late this afternoon were the in the planning board. There was
Planning
3
board.
added, so.
Yeah.
All right. And then Dan, if you need to touch base with us during that meeting on any of these, you could do that too. It's before you.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Thank you. But you're still up. It's now your town administrator.
have-
Oh, no. Nope, sorry, you got a break. I'm going to give you an update on the town administrator performance review. So we've gotten 20 responses so far. I did extend the time for town hall employees. That was where we were missing. No, and sorry, boards and committees. That was where we were missing the most. Another till Friday. So they'll be able to do that. I'll come back to you, Charles. Hang on one sec.
Yep.
Carl and I are going to meet with the town hall employees this Thursday from 10 to 12. I think there's only 2 people signed up, Julie. I don't know if more people were interested or not, but
I'll give a little nudge and see.
that would be great. What the next step would be to put a summary presentation together, meet with Dan. So Carl and I can meet with Dan first, so it's not a public surprise, and then we'll present to everybody on what I'm proposing is not the 18th, but we could do it the 18th depending on the size of the agenda. So I'd be ready to do it by then. I'd also like to get feedback from people who did the form, filled out the form, so that it's fresh, and getting feedback on what worked, what didn't work about that. And then we can implement any improvements and decide on the process for September. But I really appreciate everybody getting their reviews in. I got one from every select board member, and just a rough look at things. Dan, you're doing a great job.
Thank you.
Yeah, people are pleased and happy to have you on board, and so I think only good things moving forward.
Well, thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Yep. So that's it on any questions on that? Charles, you had a question?
I had a question from our previous item.
Sure.
The warrant. Okay, so I see the transfer from free cash to capital stabilization. I meant to ask this earlier, but then I forgot. Why is Article 18, the Capital Planning and Investment Committee debt payment? Why is that a separate warrant article? I don't recall it being a separate warrant article in the past. I believe it should have been included in the CPIC expenditures as part of their slate of expenditures.
I think I've seen them as two separates in the past, no?
It at least, well, if it is separate, it at least should be right next to the CPIC recommended expenditures. So, just to make it
Up and downness.
Yeah, we should just check
Right.
with Jared, because, same thing with the CPC debt. Like, why are they broken out? Maybe it has to be or something, some change, but we should check.
I mean, I can look at the previous warrants, but at least it should be, if, CPIC expenditures, recommended expenditures is going to be Article 15, then the CPIC debt payment should be number 16, should be right next to each other as opposed to being separate.
Yeah, and I think you're right, Charles. I don't think it was ever a separate, it was always in the list.
I always thought it was a piece of it because it's being paid from, and that the language is also like, we're not going to raise and appropriate, we're just going to pay out of CSIF. So
Yeah.
there's no question about the funding source.
Well, council will review this too, right?
Right,
So-
but at least move it up to 16 and then and ask if it can be lumped in with the slate of CPIC items.
Because the 60,288 is gonna come out of the capital
It's
fund.
coming out of CSIF.
Out of CPIC.
Definitely.
Okay, so that's totally an
It's
error.
already been approved to come out of that fund, so it's not
Great.
it's not a question of raising and appropriate or transferring or borrowing. It's
Good, thanks. Dan, you got that? Muted.
Muted. Yeah, that's from capital stabilization to the omnibus budget.
it's not
No,
in the
it's capital
omnibus. It should
stabilization
be
fund
part of
to-
CSIF.
Yeah. Doesn't go in omnibus.
Goes towards debt.
Right.
Towards town hall debt, basically is what.
Yeah, because they, and correct me if I'm wrong, but so they, this happened years ago, they voted to utilize 60,288 to pay down debt annually for something.
They bonded something, and this just continues to be a debt payment that they have taken on.
Yeah, I
Okay.
believe it was targeted towards, lessening the impact to the taxpayers.
It's like a dump truck that they paid for years and years ago. They just did something different, 15 years ago, and they continue to have to pay these debt payments. But it should either be included in the slate of expenditures, the CPIC.
Number 14 or moved next to.
Yeah, it should be moved to be Article 16 at least, if it's not going to be separate out of that slate. I can pull up the previous warrant,
Oh, no, I can look at it, Charles. That's fine. Thank you.
Okay. Dan, you're up with your town administrator's report now. Do you need to take a breath?
No, just, I don't have much to report. I didn't prepare anything because, we just had our meeting last week. So there's no real, news at all, other than I found out today, that the, actually yesterday, found out yesterday that the Littleton, water project has started and that's ongoing. So I'll get more information for your next meeting on that. I think that was basically it.
Okay.
Not much news, so I apologize for that.
You've been busy. It's okay. All right. Select board reports. Anybody have any liaison updates? I don't have anything.
HCIC is doing its other hearing tonight, so they'll have updated language with respect to the erosion control bylaw. They may have updated language after tonight, I guess.
Okay.
And I was away last week, so I don't have anything.
Yeah. Okay.
So Susan Mary, may I make another comment then? So that's again, for next year, I would like to improve things in matters like that. It's putting pressures on the staff in the office as well for, if they're making final changes to that language to be included in the warrant article, I mean, including planning board, I'm going to have a hard stop next year because, I was literally inserting from an email today on changes that affected a multitude of this document. So it's just, it's not fair to the team to have these last minute votes and try and include it in the warrant articles.
Yeah.
So.
We're all about improving things, Dan.
Yeah, we're going to keep improving. So.
All right. Seeing no other select board reports, I'll open it up for our second public commentary for the evening. If you would like to make a public comment, please turn on your video, raise your hand. Abby.
Hello, Abby Bessie, 9 Westcott Road, Chair of the School Committee. I just wanted to say I'm still not really clear on what just happened tonight with the override amount, and I don't understand why the town was allocated a level service override amount for the tier 1, but the school was assigned what seemed to me to be a random or arbitrary number created from a budget document that I haven't seen before. And I think, and I still don't know, that the schools are being allocated $521,000 in the level 1, which doesn't even cover the COLA or the contracts with our teachers, let alone buses, special education, and utilities. So I'd really like the actual numbers that we'd be working with for town 1, for tier 1 rather. And the town departments, including schools, have been working on the budgets since September. And the Finance Committee has spent an incredible amount of time and effort and thought and consideration on this work. And then I feel like the select board tonight completely disregarded all of that time and effort. And for a committee that's focused on retaining volunteers, I think you should think about how that disregard for the work that the Finance Committee did lands with them. It's troubling that I heard some criticisms from members about the school budget and operations and personnel, and also misinformation about the budget and operations and personnel. And I've never heard them before until tonight. And it's too late now, but there is plenty of time between the beginning of the budget cycle in September and now to talk about them. And I've heard people in the meeting tonight talk about how we need to sit down and go through this next year. And yes, absolutely we do. I'm always open to discussions and sitting down and having meetings, and I welcome the opportunity to have them next year because we really need to. And finally, I need to ask is, where is the town finance director? There were so many financial questions that were asked by select board members and thoughts about how much money is in free cash and other really important financial issues that I can't quite remember right now. And they weren't really able to be confirmed or corrected by the town finance director. And certainly if he's sick or has had an emergency, I understand, but that would have been a good announcement. And while this isn't the Super Bowl, it's certainly the playoffs, and his expertise was really needed. I can't imagine creating a budget for the school side without our finance director. And it was pretty, I wish that he had been here to answer the questions for us. Thank you.
Thanks, Abby. Any other public comment?
Yes, I've got some public comment here. Beth Williams, Granite View Lane. I'm on the Community Preservation Committee, and in your review of the warrant article, I think some items are missing. I ask that Dan or Julie check with Stu Sklar, because certain things like the town hall debt and other things I did not see in that listing, as well as the CPC fees. So I think there are items missing from your warrant article, and I'd hate to have them not covered.
Okay, thank you, Beth.
Thanks,
Susan?
Yeah, thank you, Susan Mary.
Name and address, please, Susan.
Yeah, Susan Tarrant, Oak Hill Road. I can see the problem here, Mr. Ludwig, in terms of your financial expertise. I've really enjoyed listening into the meeting tonight, but I think it's time, for the very least, that you apologize to the town for causing all this ruckus and pledge yourself to the code of conduct. That in my letter, the second letter, I specified so many times in the Harvard website the importance of the code of conduct. And I just think it's time for you to do that if you're going to stay on the board at least until May. That's what my request would be.
Thank you,
Thank-
Susan. Okay, I don't see any other public comment. Unless there's any other closing comments from the school committee, I would take a motion to adjourn.
Susan Mary, why don't I address that? So
Thanks, Don.
I absolutely apologize for any hurt that was caused. I think I expressed that to the board. I acknowledged it, I accepted it, I stepped down as chair. So just to go on record, I absolutely do that. I will abide by the code of conduct, and never my intention to not abide by that. So I do apologize to everyone involved for that. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, and with that, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Rich,
Aye.
Charles,
Oliver, aye.
Cara,
In our eye.
Don,
Aye.
I'm an aye. We are adjourned, everyone. Thank you so much.